The mission of Greater Than 0%
is to find people and causes changing the world,
and sharing their story to drive awareness, education, and engagement.
There are numerous causes in our world that need attention.
And so many people are doing amazing things to offer that support.
At GTZP, we want to bring more awareness to that.
Once our audience becomes aware, we want them to get curious and learn more. Use GTZP as a source of continued education in the world.
Once educated, get engaged. Use your time, talent, or treasure to accelerate the impact of these organizations.
We're called greater than 0% because we know however big or small of an impact you make, every bit counts.
We help you invest greater than 0% of yourself into a cause you care about by giving you all the information that you need to know about the organizations that are changing the world.
As long as it's greater than 0%, the momentum you have is already changing the world.
From podcast episodes to social media posts to our website, you've got everything you need to get involved. We know that finding a cause can be very personal. GTCP is here to help you find one.
Find your cause.
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 Find your cause with greater than 0%.
Today were to be my last day, would I look back and think that I've done enough, I've given back enough, I've used my gifts enough, I've helped people enough. And what I'd been doing for 5 years up until COVID for volunteering was every week I'd go to the Juvenile Temporary Detention Center here in Chicago and just have a presence with the kids there once a week on Thursday nights. And so I started reflecting on all the different nonprofits I'd worked with up until that point, all the amazing people I've met. And we created this platform, Greater Than 0%, where we interview all these different nonprofits globally to share their story in hopes that people will learn something maybe that they didn't learn. Even now, a lot of these small and medium-sized nonprofits, they don't have a marketing team, they don't have a way to get their story out there, they don't have the expertise to do this. So we just jumped into that need and try and drive people that maybe don't know about these organizations to know about them and get engaged. So Precious Blood Ministry of Reconciliation has a tons of different programs. They're a nonprofit on the south side of Chicago in the Back of the Yards neighborhood. And we're going to be interviewing their executive director, Father Kelly, their reentry coordinator, Jojo Mapp, Sister Donna, who runs their women's and moms program, basically leads of all the different resources and programming that Precious Blood does to serve the youth and adults in their neighborhood. So they're, working with these community members, these youth, these mothers who've lost their sons and daughters, people who have been incarcerated for 20 years that are not getting the resources to find a job. Talk about a mental strain. I think that's something that's just amazes me every time I find an organization like this, that they have the ability to do that.
PBMR means family. PBMR means praxis, where the theory and the action actually meets. I think that's what the P in PBMR stands for now, because it actually took a chance with someone like me, and I'm a returning citizen. And as I was returning, I was looking for a place that I could call my own, because I haven't been a part of a community in the free world, so-called free world, for a while now. Because the truth is, returning citizens are facing what's called permanent punishment. In the position that I have, I'm the director of reentry, and I'm responsible for budgets, I'm responsible for programs. I was denied a job to do general labor because I wanted to supplement my income to continue my education, to go to grad school. They told me no because of my conviction. So restorative justice to me is righting relationships. So let's get a clear example. If you and I, we've been friends for years. If I did something to offend you, because of our relationship, you would let me know and give me the opportunity to stop, to change my course of action. And if I don't stop, then now you will have to take a different approach. Give me that opportunity to make right what I'm wrong, because I talk a lot. It's a chance. I like cracking jokes. I can say something and you're having a bad day, so I can offend you. Not intentionally, but I can offend you. Give me a chance to make amends in a different way. Taking me away from you don't allow me to make it right.
So what is a peace circle?
So a peace circle is a sacred space that we create for the community, those who may have been experienced anything, or even to build relationships, because we have different type of circles. There's peace circles where we try to ensure that if any conflict arises, we can find a way to resolve it where the community is involved, vested stakeholders. Oftentimes when something's wrong, we leave it to someone else to adjudicate our situation, and people are not walking away feeling any better. Well, in the peace circle, we try to let the person who committed the harm learn that the harm is not just actually to one individual, but it's to the community, and how can we make this right?
Would the alternative be having, instead of kind of the whole judge and jury and court system, start with a peace circle, see where that goes, and then if not, move it to the judiciary system?
Being realistic, some harms is timing. It's difficult to tell a person, if I hit you, if I just caused you some harm and you said sit with me right now to discuss this. It's difficult. You need time to work through that process. It's a process that must take place before that. So it's not just, okay, this happened, let's walk in this room. We will hope to build relationships before that's an issue. Because if you have a relationship with me, if you and I on the elevator, you're not thinking I'm getting ready to do nothing to you because you know me. That's the thought we want to have. If you know me, it's much less likely for you to cause me harm or for me to cause you harm.
I feel like it just, even at a high level, a peace circle humanizes both parties at the very least, versus kind of a court system where it's not a space that's created in a way to have an open discussion about feelings. It's about, what was the action committed? Did it happen? Yes or no? Okay, yes. Here's your sentence, no. Okay, so it's very systematic versus emotional.
Yes, and that's the thing, humanizing one another and connecting. That's what restorative justice is.
No, when I first came to Precious Blood 12 years ago, they were just young boys here, mostly, because that was kind of the ministry at that time. So when I came, I'd been in Dayton, Ohio, and had worked with women coming out of prison. So I asked Father Kelly, like, where are the women? And because only Diana and I were here then. So anyway, then I also volunteered at the Juvenile Detention Center in the evenings. And we had circles there with the young men who were being tried as adults. And so many would sit in circle and they'd say, I wish I'd listened to my mother. Would you call my mother? I'm really worried about my mother. So I started calling those mothers who had children incarcerated at the Juvenile Detention Center. And, you know, one by one they'd come and they felt safe and that it was a good thing to do. And so another lady, and you probably know her, Sarah Nuez, began to start circles, healing circles for the mothers, and who felt a lot of shame because their children were incarcerated and kind of felt isolated. And so we began to develop circles with them. But at first, you know, one or two would come, and then nobody would come, and then two or three would come, and then we finally said, well, maybe we should do something different. And then kind of an interesting story, one day a woman, Tamika, came into our center, and her son had just been killed. And so she was really, really desperate and just didn't know what to do. And he had just been shot in the back in a playground in the back of someone's house or somewhere, and played football. And so anyhow, we helped her, and then I invited her to a healing circle, and I said, you might feel uncomfortable because this is just women who've lost children to the prison system. And knowing that, you know, she kind of wanted the person who killed her son to be there. Yeah. And So I said, you're welcome to come, but I want to let you know that you would be the only one, with that particular grief. And so she said, well, yeah, I just need to be with somebody. I need to talk to women. And so she came, and at first she said, yeah, that's not real comfortable. And I said, well, it's all right. We maybe will start other kind of circles, and but we'll meet one-on-one. So she said, well, I think I'll come one more time. So the next time she came, it was really a powerful experience, because as we sit in circle, she just said to the other mothers, she said, well, I feel a little different because, my son was murdered. And so she said, it's just a little hard to be here. And she kind of broke down. And then she said, but, I believe this is helpful too, because we're all suffering. And so then the circle went around to several other women. And then across kind of from Tamika was another woman whose son had been incarcerated since he was 14. And she'd been going for years, probably 20 years, to visit her son, incarcerated Julie. And she said, I don't want to disagree with anybody, but she said, my son will probably never sit at the table either, because Tamika had said, he'll never be at the table again, and I miss him at Thanksgiving. His birthday was around that time. And so she said, but Julie was saying, she said, not to argue with anybody's story, but she said, this is my story, that I go, 4 times a month, 4 hours away to visit my son, and I can't bring him home. Yeah. And he went in as a child, and he'll probably die there. Unfortunately, fortunately he won't, yeah. But the law changed. But at that time, she thought so. And at that time, these 2 women just ran across the center of the circle and embraced. And said, we both lost. Yeah. And so it's just a really brokenness that these women experience. So what we saw is when the women come together and we start out with a poem or some kind of ritual, we light a candle so that they can, just focus on the sacred. It's a safe place. We make it safe. We have certain values that's confidential. No one can tell the stories outside of the circle. They tell their truth, they listen to one another, they respect one another, no judgment, and they begin to feel so safe in this circle, And so the circle goes around from the left around the circle, and each one has a time to hold the talking piece and really tell their story without judgment, without anybody jumping up and saying, oh, I feel differently than that. There's no discussion. It's just a sharing of stories. They lament together, and they build community, and it's maybe 1-on-1, and it's 4-on-4, and then 6-on-6, and then all of a sudden 20 women are weeping and lamenting and crying together. And then by the time they leave the circle, it has turned to joy. And it's so hard to even believe that grief and sorrow and loss and tears can lead to joy. And that's what I see as these stories go around, they connect, and they know that they're not alone. And so often the moms have come to me, for maybe 4 or 5 months. They've just been sitting in their house and looking out the window thinking, maybe he'll come home, maybe she'll come home. And, then they feel so isolated. But when they come to the circle and they realize, oh, other mothers are going through the same thing. And so it just builds a community.
One of our values, one of our pillars, if you will, is radical hospitality, really opening doors wide. They come to us for support, and then we try to support them in a whole host of ways. But one of those ways is to give them a space, a healing space, to talk about their pain and their hurt, maybe for the first time, because nobody else really wants to listen. But ultimately, if we have this kind of environment where people were invited to be held accountable for their actions without being demonized or called a menace to society, then I think people would opt for restorative justice. But what we do in our present system is, if I commit a wrong, the first thing my lawyer or anybody tells me is, do not admit to anything you did. And you just clam up, I want my lawyer. And so then that process takes on. And we know how long that can take. Where a restorative justice approach treats me as a human being and recognizes I'm more than just the singular act I did, and invites me into a process, into a relationship to be held accountable. And I suggest it's how we would want it with our families, people we care about. Almost all of us would want our loved ones, our child, our young person, to be held accountable if they were also supported and loved and considered part of our community. The problem with the punitive approach is about isolation, it's about punishment, it's about banishment. And so prisons are full of people who have been convicted of something, and the victims themselves kind of walk home empty-handed. So one of the main practices that we utilize here is called the peacemaking circle. And it is really a methodology, a way of coming together, physically coming together in a circle. You put your chairs in a circle. And you tell stories, and you have symbols and stories that really allow us to really build those relationships with one another. So rather than coming in with our title and an agenda and what's the problem, what's the issue, a restorative justice practice like the peacemaking circle really says, who's in this space? Who are we? And what has impacted us, our grandmother or our family or whoever else that's in our lives that really make us who we are beyond just what we might have done. And then after you build those relationships and we come to know one another, then you might say, well, what happened and how do we repair the harm? And what I have found almost all the time in doing this, that when you build those relationships first, then the issue, whatever that issue might be, is so much more easily dealt with, because now I know who you are versus who I thought you were. It's a philosophy of relationships, and oftentimes we'll say that when there's a harm or something happening within the community, we say, what did you do, who did it, and what are we going to do to punish you? So we did a pilot project with one of our local courts, and before we got into doing the work itself, we made a policy and protocol how we're going to do this. And one of the things we said to the courts was, if you send this case to the community in a restorative organization where we do a restorative practice, then the voice of the community, the decision of the community, which is always a consensus, and it always includes both the person who was harmed and the person who did the harm and the community, that consensus, whatever that consensus is going to be accepted by the courts without question. And we had to have that in writing, and they agreed to that, and then the community itself then made the decision as to what would be the outcome or the accountability factor or the sentence, whatever word you want to use, of that person. But the victim and the person who did the harm, along with the community, all had to agree that that's, in a consensus, that's what we want. Restorative justice is what happened, who was harmed, and how can we repair that harm. And then it really works with folks to hold those accountable who need to be accountable for the repair of that harm. So really focusing on relationships and renewal and repair of relationships. I really believe wholeheartedly that if change is ever going to happen, it's going to happen in the community. But we've got to build relationships within our community. We have to start to see one another's brothers and sisters, neighbors, come out together and work for the betterment of our community. And that's where restorative justice can help.
We work with our heart. When we start moving to our head and trying to make decisions outside of our heart, it doesn't work.
My passion is to never have another family suffer in the way that my family, the person who I've caused harm to, family has suffered. I think my passion is to give people like me the opportunity to go on and be their best selves.
People have to be proximate. And I think the more we can get people into this community, if it's from government, from the city, from just churches, from the prison system, to be here and see what the effects of what they're doing is impacting us and how hard we have to work to impact the good.
People have an insanely massive ability and capacity to give back. And I just don't think that resource in people the surface has been scratched. I think there's still so much more potential for people to give back. If it's anything similar to Father Kelly, he'd say that it's not really about you, it's not about me, it's about where we are in the world, the situations we're put in, and what is our response to that? Like, are we going to step up? Are we going to apply our gifts that we've been given, the privilege we've been given, or are we not?